All right, welcome. I am Will, and this is John. And you're watching the Fast Track. Fast, because I like to fast. Track, because John likes to track everything. I was eating wings before we started, and I licked my fingers, and he said to make sure that I track that sauce that came out of my cuticles.
That
So,
honey barbecue counts, man. That's sugar.
all right, so we're having this discussion today because during my mukbang earlier, the mukbang 6, where I review Netflix's Unwell, one of the topics of discussion was Christy Harrison, who's a registered dietitian, who had some not so nice things to say about fasting. And in particular, what she went into are the hunger cues. Her thing is intuitive eating. And my viewpoints could not be further from hers. And I get that she's a registered dietitian and I am not. All I have is my experience to go off of. But with that said, I think that my experiences would tell me something completely different than what she's telling other people their experiences are with their hunger. So, John, I just want to get started with what intuitive eating is and how important hunger is. Okay.
Right. And for intuitive eating, there is literally nothing besides hunger. Like that's the only important thing. That's what matters, right? You eat. Basically, the whole premise is you eat when you're hungry, and you eat until you're not anymore, until you're satiated, and then that's kind of it. So there's no structured timing. There's no like monitoring of anything besides like you eat when you're hungry and you stop when you're not. So
And so during the episode, she has somebody in her clinic and she passes this other woman a pamphlet that says subtle signs of hunger. And I paused it so that I could write down what her pamphlet says are the subtle signs of hunger. And let me read those for the people watching. The first one is difficulty making decisions. The second one is feeling irritable or annoyed. The third one is difficulty concentrating. The fourth one is feeling uncomfortable or agitated. And then fantasizing about your next meal, sweating, headaches, and nausea. Okay? I mean, it just seems like if those are the subtle signs of hunger, then I'm subtly hungry all day, every day.
yeah, I don't know where that came from. Like I'd be willing to bet that that's not from like a textbook or like something that's in the like medical field. That's probably just like the way that she goes about dealing with her clients and whatnot. You know what I mean? So I'll be with you on that one in saying that there's no way you can just categorize those things as being like, if this is happening, it's because you're hungry. You know what I mean? There's
Mm-hmm.
no way. I also don't think that you are wrong in saying that intuitive eating is mostly trash, but I come at it from a much different viewpoint than you are. Because I do think that we do need to be in tune with your hunger signals. But I think that the majority of the people who attempt that literally have no idea what those mean. And the decisions that they make when they just eat when they're hungry versus and stop when they're not are completely different from people who, like, say somebody like myself, if I were to not never track anything, never follow a specific diet, but I just ate intuitively, my intuition is much different from Becky down the street, you know what I mean, who's never done anything along the lines of keeping track of their food intake, dieting ever. So I agree with you that intuitive eating is mostly trash, but because of that, not because hunger signals don't matter. I think they very much do.
Mm-hmm. So there was another person in this episode who is pro fasting, and he says if you were to get on, most people think that if they get on an airplane in New York and fly to California, somewhere over Colorado,
Nobody
they
thinks this.
they think they'll die. It's very much hyperbole, but they think they'll die if they don't have that bag of pretzels, and which is very true. I mean, we're just snacking all the time, so I get that. But what I think is that people don't even know what real hunger is. We've been so conditioned since the day we were born to just always be eating all the time. There's never been a time in human history where we've had such an abundance of food, and we think that the way to fight that abundance of food is to just listen to our bodies. That is so, like, there is so much privilege. That's the word of 2020. There is so much privilege behind you deciding to just go off of your hunger cues to eat. It's just such a garbage concept. It doesn't even make any sense. There's never been a time in human history. We are organic beings, and there's never been a time in human history or any other animal history where they just say, oh, you know what? I'm feeling, I have a headache. Maybe I'm a little bit hungry. I'm going to eat this other animal now. Like that's not how evolutionary biology would tell you that we've evolved to be where we're at. It's just complete trash. She starts by having a woman in her clinic who says, you know, I always feel bad because I do this feast or famine. I've tried intermittent fasting. It doesn't work for me because it's feast or famine. I eat so much at once and then I feel guilty. That's a societal pressure. That has nothing to do with the fasting. That is people telling you that if you eat 2,000 calories in a sitting, you should feel guilty. That your body is not telling you to feel guilty. That is society telling you to feel guilty. So I just
right, but the body's telling you to feel something, though. And coming from you, you have to agree with that. You are all about hormones over calories, basically, right? In terms of like importance and what matters. So you've got to give some credit to those hormones, and the reason that you feel the hunger or satiation is a signal from a hormone being released in your body, right? So ghrelin and leptin are obviously important, or ghrelin, whatever it is. The hormonal signals and substances that get produced by your body that regulate whether you're hungry or not, they are telling you that, you know what I mean? It's not society telling you that you should or shouldn't be hungry. Like something in your body is sending a signal to your brain that you should eat. And I would agree that most of the time, kind of like what I said before, those signals are either misinterpreted or they're just out of whack for most people because of kind of like what you said, the way that we've been conditioned to eat and whatnot is not in any way normal. If it was, we wouldn't have an obesity issue, you know what I mean? So,
right.
But there is still underlying things that you could get down to like, why am I hungry? You know what I mean? And I think the better way of going about it is looking at those root causes, like looking at other factors that affect it, like your sleep or your stress, things like that also trigger hormonal fluctuations that could throw those things off.
But so, what is more natural, I guess, in like we are saying, what you're saying is, well, you release ghrelin, which is telling you that you're hungry. What is more natural, pacifying that ghrelin every single time that it's released, or having those levels of ghrelin and knowing how to feel in tune with those and be hungry for a longer period of time? We didn't always have the tools that we have now, like going back, like starting with pickling or whatever, however else we saved food, and then getting into, 60 or 100 years ago, getting electric refrigeration and cooling and freezers. And then now we're at a point where we scientifically change our food so that it stays shelf stable forever. To me, it seems like forever we had levels of ghrelin within our body and levels of other hunger hormones that we just knew how to control.
Shut up.
And now we just pacify it, and that's what's leading to all of the obesity and all of the problem. You shouldn't just be, every time you feel a little bit of hunger, you shouldn't just pacify and eat those pretzels or eat whatever it is that you have in front of you.
Okay, but by your logic, if there was a time, like when evolutionary standpoint, at the very beginning, if we never had access to food, if it wasn't always readily available, then we would have been, those hunger signals would be more like fluctuated in the structure that you're talking about. Like they would be much more spaced out. Like you would only get a ghrelin spike once every 3 days.
No, they wouldn't be. I don't believe.
You think that your body would just tell you that you're hungry, but you were just supposed to be okay with it?
Anybody who has fasted will tell you that when you first start fasting, it is hard because you're so used to eating. But once you get used to going 8 hours, you do 8 hours a few times without eating, or like more, 16 hours without eating, it gets easier. You get better at it. You're less hungry. When I first started doing 3-day fasts, it was scary. Now it's not something that I'm afraid of. and I'm less hungry on day 2 than I was on day 1, and I'm less hungry on day 3 than I was on day 2. Just because we have those levels doesn't mean that that's natural. It means that we are so out of whack that we're releasing so much of these hunger hormones every 2 hours. We eat when we wake up, and then 2 hours later, we're releasing hormones that are telling us we're hungry.
But by your logic too, you're saying that you don't believe that it's been a long enough period of time that we would actually have adapted that our hormones should fluctuate as much as they do in terms of our hunger level. But you're also assuming that you can fast for 3 days and all of a sudden they're just fixed. That over hundreds and hundreds of years that nothing could possibly have changed that much, but you think that they can change in 3 days or 2 days of fasting?
Right. You're saying hundreds. How many hundreds of years?
You're the one who said it. You're talking about from an evolutionary standpoint.
Yeah, I'm asking you. You're saying hundreds and hundreds of years. Let's break it down into like a generational thing. Okay. Three generations ago, we got refrigeration. So if you're asking me if I think that humans have evolved in 3 generations to have better hormones to deal with the overabundance of food that we have now.
Right.
No, I don't.
You're saying no.
I don't think that's possible.
But you think we can adjust our hormones in 3 days?
No, that's not what I'm saying. Yes, I do. I think that your body is supposed to be able to handle that, and it's ready for it. You're talking about an evolution over periods of generations of species versus I think that my body is closer to humans 10,000 years ago than it is to being able to handle food every 2 hours. I don't think we've evolved there yet. I'm closer to 10,000 years ago than I am to somebody who's supposed to be eating every 2 hours. The people 10,000 years ago were eating maybe, depending on where you were at and what type of civilization you were in, it still wasn't anything like we're eating now. I think that my body can adjust to that because it's supposed to be adjusting. We are adjusting poorly, very poorly to eating so much. We have so much inflammation. We have so many other diseases that are caused from the inflammation. We're having so much digestion problem. All kind of stuff that comes on from digesting food too much. We are not supposed to be digesting food this much. That's what this whole thing's about. That is what my whole argument is about. So you're asking me, like, by that logic, you're right. You're right. Like, I don't know what else to say about it. I think that it's ridiculous.
Well, here's another side of the coin too that kind of contradicts that, but also just kind of makes you think about it a different way. Because you say that, let's say you fast for 1 day, you're going to be hungry the first day, right? Whatever, obviously. Then if you make it 2 days, the hunger starts to subside, right? It goes away. I see the same types of adaptations occur when people start eating more food after being in a situation where they were under eating, you know what I mean? Where they're like, oh, you know what? I'm not as hungry anymore. I don't have these cravings. I'm not constantly thinking about food.
Whereas eating more food.
Yeah. So they're not thinking about it anymore. They're less hungry. You know what I mean? Because they're not under eating anymore. So the same byproduct, those signals being more regulated and more normalized, is coming about from this completely opposite protocol than you would adhere to. You know what I mean? Take the food away completely for 2 days, it'll normalize. Increase the food a little bit, it'll normalize. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Either way, I'm at the same stance as you in terms of like right now, that Christy lady saying that like intuitive eating is the answer to the problem that's in the country and the world right now with overweight and obesity is absolutely false. If you just told everybody what in a simplified version of what she says is eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full, we would have more obese people than we have now. And that's hard to believe. You know what I mean?
And I think we could get there. I want to say something just for everybody, for the perspective of anybody listening. John deals with clients who a lot of them believe, I've been trying to lose weight or be in shape and my calories are at 1,400 calories. And he often looks at them and says, 1,400 calories is ridiculous. We need to get that up to whatever, like 2,700 for this person. And I'm telling you, you're going to lose weight because you're feeding and then your hormones are going to be better and everything like that. Is that a pretty good summary?
Yeah. In a very basic sense, that's pretty much what we do.
So that's what he was saying in response to me talking about the fasting and the hormones earlier. Yeah, I just I think that we can leave it there. I mean, we're in agreement that we don't think that the intuitive eating is the way to go. But I
Right.
do want to give one piece of credit to that, and that is body acceptance. And I think that a lot of intuitive eating is an up and coming phrase, and a lot of what they preach, and it seems that is from what I've seen, a lot of the people that I've seen that are using the hashtag intuitive eating are female. And I want to make sure I say this correctly. There's a body acceptance is an important thing. We all go through, I think a lot of us go through like not being comfortable in our own skin. And a lot of us see our bodies that are perfectly healthy and still don't accept them. So when it comes to intuitive eating, I think that a lot of what they preach is you don't need to worry about like still trying to lose weight. They're worried about, they call it diet culture is something that I've seen intuitive eating influencer talking about, and how diet culture is bad. I just want to say that if you can get to a point where you're intuitive eating and you're healthy and you feel comfortable in your skin, that is what's probably most important as long as you're a healthy person. I'm not arguing that is not a good tool for being a happy person. But if you want to talk about weight loss in general and normalizing your hormones and what we should be doing, I don't think that's from an evolutionary biology standpoint, the best thing that we could be doing.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. I think that down the road, intuitive eating is the ultimate end goal where everybody should end up. But let's say that that's the car. You need the individual parts of the car in order to drive it, right? So the wheels might be tracking your calories for a certain period of time. The wheel might be, or the steering wheel might be something else. And I mean, you have to build up those pieces and actually put the car together before you can actually drive it. You can't just freaking hop into an empty body and expect it to go anywhere. You know what I mean? So ultimate end goal, that's what we'd want everybody to do. Yeah, just be happy. Don't stress over things and don't obsess over things for your entire life. Just live it and be happy with it. But you have to learn how to get there first before you can actually be successful with that. Because clearly, as a whole, as a species, we haven't been. You know what I mean?
Right. We've gotten so out of whack over the last 100 years, but more specifically the last 50 years, and it's just getting worse, not getting better. John, I appreciate you hopping on. That was a pretty good conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
Hopefully we can have some more discussions. I mean, we could jump back into this episode again, and we could talk about there are plenty of conversations that were had during this. We just covered about a 3-minute segment of that show. If you haven't watched Netflix Unwell episode 4 on fasting, it's worth a watch. It's pretty straight down the middle. It gives you things about mental clarity. It gives you things about intermittent fasting, gives you things about 30-day fasting, water fasting. It talks about oncology. It talks about leaky gut. There are a lot of topics covered, and if you're interested in any of those, you should go give it a watch.
Yeah, and even I will say that I'm not super against it. In most Netflix documentaries, I am, because there's always something behind it that you're trying to be sold on or whatever. And unless those clinics or whatever are expecting people to come and pay for their services, I don't really think that this one has kind of like a underlying back end agenda. So
there's also an episode, I don't think John watched it yet. There's an episode about breast milk, which is interesting because they do the same thing. All the episodes are the same thing where they have like eight people who are interested in this, whether it be positive or negative. And it's pretty cool. It has a bodybuilder in there who like buys breast milk on the internet and like meets up with these moms in coffee shops to buy their breast milk. It's pretty cool. You should go watch it.
It's not me.
It's not John. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for watching, guys.
All right.